more reasons why cooking with children is a great idea, even if it makes a hell of a mess. Dr Vicki Hargraves is an early childhood teacher, mother, and currently ECE research specialist at the Education Hub, an organisation that supports teachers with knowledge about best practice. She says spending time in the kitchen with your children is a great way to support their learning, from shapes, colours, comprehension, sequencing and creativity. Plus, ultimately, if you do a good job, you'll end up with kids who can share the cooking load in the household. Kia ora, Vicki, great to have you with us.
Kia ora, thanks for having me.
Food aversion and sort of funny ideas about certain foods, this was always put as another good reason to get kids in the kitchen when they can see where things have come from and how they're made. It can help with those issues. But you take a much broader approach. Tell us why the extra time and mess involving children in cooking and baking is a really good idea.
Well, first of all, I'm a mum too, and so I totally understand how difficult that inviting your children to cook with you can be, in terms of, you know it's going to get messy, and you're kind of giving up a bit of control about how the whole process goes. You probably have a really good routine for how you get something done quite quickly, and involving your children is going to slow that right down. So I do understand. But when we think about all of the potential for learning, first of all, there's this wonderful connection between parent and child as you're doing something together, and all the conversation that you're hopefully having as you talk about what you're doing. You can be talking about the kind of the maths that you're seeing as you, cut vegetables into different shapes, or you count out a certain number of things for a recipe, or a certain number of things for each plate. I mean, we're talking fractions when we're cutting up, pizza and cake. And we're talking multiplication when we work out that we're going to need so many of these for a certain number of people in the family, even laying the table, working out how many forks you will need and things. If you're using a recipe, you're talking about doing things first and doing things second. You might be inviting your child to read some of the recipe for you. We have all the capacity as you're weighing things out. And there's so much motor skill as well, to actually, even just to spread butter on toast, it's an incredibly difficult motor skill. And then we have the science of actually changing this gloopy cake mixture into something that's, solid.
It's chemistry, isn't it?
It is chemistry, yes, absolutely.
At what age can this start, Vicki? And can you also think about what your child is learning developmentally, but also learning in the curriculum, if you like? Can you really get quite clever about using this to reinforce where they're at? At what age can you start?
You can start as early as you like, I would say. If your child is old enough or skilled enough to sit in a high chair, you can be putting things on the high chair for them to have a go. Stirring and things like that can be done by very, very young infants, as who are just sitting at the high chair. And I think you're right. You can be really intentional about the curriculum aspects, and in early childhood settings, we might plan to do a particular cooking activity because of a particular scientific concept that we're practicing. And children need lots and lots of exposure. So in another way, it's just good to be doing it and knowing that every time you're talking about, the fractions of a pizza as you cut it up, you need to do that repeatedly for children to get a really solid sense of the concept and the solid sense of the language that you're using. We learn what these different words such as whisking mean by having repeated experiences of being shown whisking and having a go at whisking.
It's great motor skills. I know I'm talking to teachers who are so worried with children being so comparatively sedentary these days. Even things like basic balance and motor skills and coordination aren't perhaps what they were a few decades back. And those fine movements, focusing, concentrating on fine movements are very good skills to be getting.
And I think it was a good point that you made about children who maybe do have food aversions. That's often it can be really good not to enforce for children to be trying the foods, but just playing with the foods. Although that's a sort of a concept that, we sort of think, is this okay? But actually playing with food can help children who are feeling a little bit unsure about a new food, just to feel more comfortable with it. Even if on that particular time they don't actually end up trying it, again, repeated exposure exposure to foods and where they come from. And children can be so excited to collect things as they grow. If you have a herb garden or a small veggie patch, and being involved from, from soil to table is amazing for children.
Kneading
But I think
things and flouring the hands and all that. And again, that's
yeah.
a kind of a scientific process again, as things change in terms of their density and their viscosity and all these sorts of things. I'm also interested in the kind of the sequencing, the first, second, third. This is very valuable learning, isn't it? And just to elaborate on where they're at in learning when this is becoming a concept for them.
So, so there's so many different ways in which we use number, and understanding sort of the ordinality of, first, second, and third is another very important aspect of mathematics, that children do need that very practical demonstration of first, second, and third. And then we also can really extend their cognition when we think about why is it important to do this step first and another step second. So, with older children, you can really be thinking about what happened if we'd done that the other way round, for example. So yes, there's lots and lots of potential to really extend children's thinking.
But also those disciplines that they're going to need when they're older, planning, putting something into a theoretical plan, then calculating and getting the things that you need lined up, and then the order of tasks. These are all the disciplines when you're studying later, when you're planning how you're going to get through your NCEA courses. If they're still here when these kids are older. This is
absolutely,
all,
Catherine,
it's that ability to visualise and plan forward.
Yes, and that's executive function, which is your sort of most higher order mental functioning, is to be able to plan ahead what you're going to do, to then stick to that plan. Now we know with really young children, they might get distracted as they start putting their hands in the flour and forget which phase of the or what they're supposed to be doing, which is okay, because executive function is something that emerges very slowly and isn't really fully developed till we're in our 20s. But we can really help children to practice that with cooking, because as you say, you've got to pay attention, you've got to inhibit your desire to put your hands in, perhaps. For older children,
delayed gratification, there you go,
learning to do that. Sorry,
delayed gratification as well. You can't eat the cake mixture.
You don't get to eat it yet. Although I think there's quite a few children dipping their fingers in. But yes.
The chemistry is another side of this as well. And this is where I do want to think, I remember one of our commentators once talking about not inhibiting children's imagination about, how the universe was formed or what the stars are and why they twinkle. Like, they'll have their own creative explanations for this, and let them have it. Don't come in with a whole bunch of really complex kind of science at an age-appropriate way. So let's talk about some of the chemistry that's happening. And again, do you want to bear in mind, if they ask, you can tell them what's happening with why something's bubbling or why something's changing shape or what the gases are doing. But you don't need to turn it into, an undergrad chemistry lesson either. There's a balance here.
Yeah, I think there is. And that's about sort of tuning into your child as well. But I think that we often underestimate what children are capable of. So dropping in a comment, so it doesn't become a question answer, it doesn't become a lecture, but it becomes in a comment of, oh, I've noticed the bubbling here. And did you notice it didn't bubble till it got really, really quite hot? And talking about how, the gas is escaping. That can be sort of offered to children, and then just seeing how your child takes that up. And if there are more questions, that's something you go into more deeply. It is really important for children to invent their own theories for what's going on. And the younger the children are, these will be imaginative. And I think sometimes as parents, we think, is it okay to let them have this kind of erroneous view of science? But it's important to remember that all science is actually theories. And quite often some of the theories that we've understood about science plans have changed as more research has become available. Scientists are actually always changing their theories. And then we can kind of see this in children too. As they grow older and have more experience, their theories are likely to change. But what we value is that they see themselves as thinkers, they see themselves as theorizers, and they're coming up with ideas. And they're really thinking when they're doing that. You're really challenging your child's thinking when you ask them to come up with their theory. So I think there's a really
A
important
balance.
mixture there.
Yeah, it was Nathan Wallace actually saying, at a certain age, let their imaginations run, let their storytelling run. You don't have to have their science perfect when they're helping you bake a cake. The other thing is prediction can be part of this as well. And, if you're trying to make bread rise or a pavlova. And again, this requires another function, perhaps executive function, which is the ability to project forward to what should happen anyway, perhaps not in the case of the PAV, if you follow a certain series of steps.
Yes, and then comparing if what you expected to happen did happen. And I think there's wonderful opportunities for that in cooking, particularly if you're happy to sort of let go of the sort of proper recipe and maybe have a go with what happens. Maybe you've made a recipe a few times and now you want to maybe change an element to it and see what would happen. My children love doing that, and it makes me nervous, I admit, but they want to swap out an ingredient. And so then we can have a prediction about what difference that might make. Is it important to have eggs in our cake, and then notice the difference between an egg. In fact, you can use, very small cake containers or make mug cakes with, slightly different combinations or slightly different proportions in each to just notice the difference. I mean, that's an amazing way to learn, but I'm not sure every output then is edible.
Indeed. Of course, there's the biology as well. There's photosynthesis, there's why are plants green, certain plants green, and that can be weaved into, as you say, especially if you can grow. I mean, it's not too hard to grow herbs. All my basil gets eaten, but you can use this as another part of the story as well. The other part of this, even at a young age, is collaboration. You do this and I'll do this, and can you help me with this, please? And tell me a little bit more about why this is such a good environment. So often young children, I mean, they're price takers, aren't they? Can you please do this, we're doing this. This is an opportunity for them to almost feel like they're part of a team, part of an equal equation here.
Yes, absolutely. And for their sort of agency and identity as sort of feeling like, a contributing member of their family, as we all want to be contributing members of society, and we feel valued when our contribution is noticed and appreciated. And I think very young children often look to mum and dad, and they want to be able to, we see their play, they're often playing at being mum or dad and reenacting some of those roles. So they really enjoy that. And I think, it may be that you can make your cooking activity quite co-constructive, in that it's not you deciding what we're making and then giving the children the jobs. It can be, perhaps a bit more of a negotiation about what we're going to make, and I don't know, which fruit are we going to put on top of the cake, and this is wonderful to start thinking about, well, what's the nutrition involved in our food? So, if we want this to be a nutritious meal, what food group have we not perhaps included in our meal planning? And inviting children to contribute their ideas to that, while also teaching them about what's important in terms of what should be included in a meal. And I think that, ultimately the thing that makes our children thrive the most is very strong relationships within their families.
Everyone feels good when they help, Vicki, don't they? Or they help solve a problem, or they help doing something. Just finally, at what point, at what age, and I know this is broadly speaking, but at what age or stage can you expect that a child or a youth may be the one who's pretty much responsible for doing it's Tuesday night, it's your signature dish, and perhaps even doing all of it, shopping list, maybe not buying, because they might come back with a bunch of other things as well, but actually being the person to decide and produce the meal? At what age can that be quite realistic?
Well, I think that can be scaffolded from quite a young age, maybe even 7 or 8. And when I say scaffolded, you're working through it together. You're looking at the recipe and you're writing the shopping list together. And I think so. It would depend on whether they've had those scaffolded experiences when they were younger, in order to maybe be preparing a meal when they were 11 or 12. But yes, every child is very different, and it does depend on their experience, their executive function skills, and their interest, I think, as well. Super interested kids who are practicing this a lot will quickly be very capable in the kitchen.
We haven't talked about dishes and cleaning up. Should that be built in right from the start as well to their ability?
Yes, I think so. And I think actually very young children love to have the bubbles in the water and splash. My daughter loves to do it. I sometimes have to wash a few things again afterwards. Um, but yeah, so making it part of the fun initially. And then I think when you've got those expectations and that you're willing to share. So, again, that can be something you negotiate. Shall I clean up the sides and you wash up the dishes? The child can have a choice around which part of the helping clean up that they do. And usually that's the time when the food is actually cooking, so that once the cleanup is done, you can be sort of checking if things are ready and ready to eat. So that's quite nice too.
Thank you, Dr Vicki Hargraves, who's with the Education Hub. She's an early childhood teacher, a mum, currently ECE research specialist at the Education Hub.